Greetings, how are you? Welcome along. It is Inspire and Be Inspired. Today's inspirational conversation comes from one of the UK's most respected and renowned heads on the soul, funk, jazz, and house music scene. Over the course of however long it takes, it's going to be my absolute pleasure to talk to Dr. Bob Jones and try and find out how he became one of the biggest names to come out of the UK. Over 5 decades of music knowledge, we're going to do our very best to dig deep and share some of the stories that he has. Without further ado, I will bring Dr. Bob onto the stream and say, good evening, sir. Thank you for giving me your time today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the invite. It's been good. It will be good. And yeah, I've never done a video link before. I've always done sort of like maybe a pre-recorded show or something as a guest for someone. But so this is a first one for me.
Wonderful. Well, I'm
enjoying it.
I'm honoured to be the person to break your cherry, as they say.
No, it's good because we've known each other for years. You know, without being funny to the audience, and you live in Spain now, and it's good that we're hooking up again.
Indeed,
because the respect is on both sides, my friend.
Thank you very much. Wow. To hear that from yourself makes me feel very good. Let me just take 2 seconds to say for the beginning of the interview that we try to make this as interactive as possible. I do say that every week when I have my guests on. We do get a lot of people in the chat. And for all of you who are with us live, please do feel free to leave any comments, answer any questions, bring up anything that springs to mind. But because I do know we are going to be covering a hell of a lot of information over the course of the next few minutes, that it may take me a little while to get to your comments, but I do see them all, so please do be patient with me. And that also goes for anybody watching the recording. Please do let Bob know that you've heard his words and comment on anything that it brings up. So a gentleman who has interviewed many more people than he's had hot dinners, I'm fairly certain, down the years. I am kind of a little bit stuck as to where we should begin, really. I will hand it over to yourself and think, where would you believe with the interview that you've always wanted to give, we should begin?
Well, it goes, both my parents lived in sort of like the outskirts of London, and during to go back to World War II, they moved a lot of families to the home counties because of they were getting, you know, their homes were getting destroyed by bombers and bits and pieces like that. We got moved. My father and mother come from Hackney / Tottenham, and we got moved to Chelmsford in Essex, which is where I grew up and spent a lot of my life, my education and also my musical education. I grew up in a family of sort of 4 children. There's me and my younger brother as sort of 3rd and 4th down the line, and 2 sisters. My oldest sister June, who unfortunately is not on the planet anymore, but the second oldest sister Linda. The way I describe it in past interviews is that from her dance set during the 60s, the music I was hearing, I liked. It went in my head and didn't go out. And so, and the music that I heard initially from her was like blues, rhythm and blues, and I suppose early 60s soul. And then there was a dance hall in Chelmsford called the Corn Exchange that I used to visit on a Saturday night. They used to put bands on, and majority of the bands that played there were British bands like John Mayall's Blues Breakers and bands like that, and the Animals, and you know, that went on to become rock bands in their own right. But their initial playlist in the early days was all black music. And but they were all Hammond B3 led, you know, the Hammond B3 organ with the big Wurlitzer revolving, and that was a big influence because when I started collecting jazz in the 60s, organists were a big influence on me. People like Jack McDuff, Jimmy McGriff, Jimmy Smith, massive influence. And my local pub where I lived in North Chelmsford, on a housing estate called Melbourne Housing Estate, and was called the Red Beret. And I walked in there one day, and the governor said to me, and that was in 1967. He said, "You've got a record collection, haven't you?" I said, "I have, but it's mainly, Jamaican, Afro-American, soul and reggae, rhythm and blues and blues." I said, "I don't collect chart stuff at all." He said, "Would you? Our DJ has let us down for this week, for Saturday. Would you play for us?" So I borrowed a mate of mine had a couple of decks. I think it was Graham Grumpy Brown from Brentwood. Anyway, who's on Facebook. I borrowed his equipment and struggled through the Saturday. "Yeah, mate, have you got any rock? Have you got any rock and roll? Have you got anything?" I said, "No, sorry. All I play is what I..." But the landlord come up to me at the end of the evening and said, "I'd like you to do every week." And I'm going, "Really?" Right, plastic smile time. Anyway, fast forward a few months, and I started doing every week there and had a great night out of it.
Okay,
But afterward, it finished at pub hours, 11. We used to go to the only late night club in town called DJs, DEEJAYS, run by a family called Newcomb, who owned a lot of property in Chelmsford. And Colin Newcomb was the manager. And he got to know me. And the same thing happened. He had, I think it was a BBC DJ he had on a Friday night. And he said, "I'll be let down tomorrow night. Bob, can you do tomorrow?" I said, "Colin, I only collect black music. That's all I've got in my entire collection. If you want me to do it, I'll do it. But I don't want hassle from people." The club held just under 300 people, so it wasn't massive, but it was the only late night 8 till 2 club in Chelmsford.
Well, let me put a pause in the conversation there.
Go on in.
So we're talking about 1967. I never actually asked you exactly when you were born, and we never got into how you got turned on to buying black music. I know you said you were influenced by your sister's musical taste, but let's roll
and
it
radio
back.
shows.
And the radio shows. So let's take a very quick look at that. The year you were born, very briefly, for anyone that wouldn't be aware.
1949.
Okay, so 1949 you were born, turn of the 50s, and so how you started buying vinyl, where you got the money from to buy the vinyl.
I was about 16. So 49 and 16 would be 55, wouldn't it?
65.
And I was about 16 at the time, and I used to do a paper round, delivering evening papers to sellers and businesses in Chelmsford town centre. And I think, I can't remember the exact figure that I got paid. I think it was between £10 and £15, which...
Wow.
Yeah, but it was 7 days a week.
Okay.
So, yeah, exactly. So it was with the money that I got from that, let's go for the lesser, say £10. There was a record shop called, and a music shop called the Pop Inn next door to one of the cinemas in Chelmsford. And I went in there, and funnily enough, EMI used to do a printed, I don't know if you remember it or not, I don't know if I've got one handy, but I came across some that they used to print out a leaflet each week that had the top 20 on one side, and record shops had them, and the next 2 weeks releases on the front. And anything that sounded black, like, or on black labels like London, American, Stax or something, I would tick, go into my record shop, and whatever money I'd got spare, I would order blind. There was there was a radio show which was hosted in the 60s on Radio Luxembourg by a young man called Stuart Henry, Scottish DJ, who's now I think works for the BBC. He used to do a radio show, and I'd listen to him. The show would fade in and out at home on the radio, and I'd try and note down what he played that I liked, that sounded soulful or was rhythm and blues or jazz orientated. And that's how I started my early record collection, basically.
Can you picture the emotions that you had the first time that you heard something? There must have been a moment when you were like, Oh my gosh, what is
Yeah,
that? As you're
that
frantically.
was from Linda's catalogue. Definitely, it was like, you know, she'd be, you'd hear. I was a big lover of harmonica blues,
Okay.
especially Sonny Boy Williamson, a stunning harp player. And I saw him on Ready Steady, and I watched Ready Steady Go on Fridays because my mother ruled the roost at home, and we were Methodists. We grew up being members of the Methodist Church, and the youth side of the Methodist Church was a group of people called the Boys Brigade. And me and my younger brother John, who's 18 months younger than me, we had to join the Boys Brigade because Mum said so. Every Friday night we had to go to a meeting. But before we went out there, I had a twin track tape recorder. And I used to tell my dad, he used to dabble in electronics and bits and pieces. I'd say he used to tape the microphone to the television. It was like a flat, half round or flat on one side. I said, when Ready Steady Go comes on, because me and my brother were at the Boys Brigade meetings in Chelmsford, which was in the town centre at the Methodist Church in London Road. When the programme starts, Dad, flick them two switches up, and he'd record it onto reel to reel. And then when I got home over the weekend, I would play back the reel to reel and anything soulful that was being played. So all I got was the soundtrack, because videos were, well, the military might have had them at that time, but we certainly didn't have video players or nothing like that. So anything that sounded soulful or black, or if there was anything on there, like there was a Memphis tour once. There was Otis Redding, Sam and Dave, Booker T and the MGs, Cara Thomas. They were on there live. The whole program was dedicated to them. And I think my tape, I had to buy a 2.5, 3 hour tape and record it at half speed or something to get the show in, so I could get in the entire tracks, and I'd write down. Then I'd go into William Dace or the Pop In and say, can you order this? Can you order that? Can you order this? So that's how it all started, basically.
That's how you all started. So
but I was so popular doing the Red Berry that people said, can you do my weddings and parties? And I went, yeah, I can, but all I play is this. I don't play chart stuff, you know, and I for my sins.
So 19, 20 years of age, 67 into 69, turn of the 70s then.
Yeah. I and because we went down to DJs after the Red Berry, and I got to do DJs on a Friday night. And that's where the Surgery was born, the Surgery with Dr. Bob Jones. And I played at DJs from to, is it 71 to 70? It was either 71 or 77, 78, I think it was, that I grew up at.
And that was the so tell me again about the Surgery. You said that the Surgery began.
Yeah, I think it was 71. Let me just check, because I wrote it all down.
Oh, he's got his notes. He's got his notes.
1971 and 1978.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the inspiration to call it the Surgery? Was that a masterstroke of yourself, or?
Well, because people were calling me, first of all, it was Bob Jones. And then people started calling me Dr. Bob Jones. So hence the doctor and the surgery sort of clashed together. So, you know, he's doing a surgery on black music, and that's how it all started, really.
Okay, so yeah. some significant moments then, as we got into the mid-70s. By this time, who were you rolling with? Any other DJs that were big on the circuit that you would see as your inspiration, your mentors?
When I was at the
when you were doing the Surgery, as you were coming along, and you were obviously strengthening your own collection. You clearly had your own vision of what you wanted and where you were going with the music.
Yeah.
But you must have taken some inspiration from others.
Yes, of course. I mean, even the black market DJs in Essex, I took a thump from, because I worshipped, I worshipped the ground they walked on, and people like Chris Hill at the gold mine, and later Jeff Young, and those people sort of, got me a feeling that there was something there, because I trained when I left school to become an electrical fitter, an electrical engineer with the Eastern Electricity Board, and music was just a hobby. It wasn't a future, one of my future pastimes, and didn't really intentionally become. But it got to a point after those, during which I did the Chelmsford DJs for 71 to 78. One Friday, about mid-70s, a lot of record companies brought out mailing lists, because disco was creeping into clubs, and they had a lot of black music. A lot of companies had their own black music session, and all of a sudden, and you had to fill in. And I had an email to Warner Brothers, which was run by a guy called Fred Dove. And I'm playing away on Friday night, and about 9:30, 9:45, Colin Newcomb, the owner of the club, said, "I've got a Mr. Dove at the door for you, wants to come in and see you." I said, "Oh, right, yeah, let him in. If there's any fee, I'll pay, take it out of my wages at the end of the evening." And Fred come up to me and said, "Oh, I thought I'd come up and see you. You say that you can get away with this and you can't get away with that and get away with this." And he stayed there all evening. And I used to get groups of dancers come from Colchester, Witham, Braintree, all Essex people, and mainly sort of like youngsters. It wasn't. Whereas the Saturday night that I used to occasionally go to socially, would have been more of a poppier night, whereas my night was black music night. And yeah, Fred Dove was the first person to come down there and suss it out. And then he went back home, and the week after he said, "I really enjoyed that. I'm going to send you other stuff." And that I got into his mailing list. And on the back of that, Jeff Young came down. You know what I mean? It sort of like sparked off
lots of interest.
Yeah, because the mid to late 70s in Britain, disco took off in a big way.
And what was your feeling about that, between the shift between a Motown sound, for example, into the disco sound?
You had good and bad, I suppose, in that. In some ways, it did water down the music, and there was good disco and there was bad disco. It was like everything else, and I thought, and the only thing I couldn't get to grips with was the techno side of it. I couldn't get that. It went from disco to techno. I couldn't get to grips with that. That was too electric for me. There was no real soul there, because
what you're talking about, the Marauder kind of sound.
Yeah, they were sampling stuff as well, which left people were building, like, electric pianos and that were samplers, so you didn't need a full group with you, did you? You didn't need a drummer, you didn't need a bass guitar, you didn't need a lead guitar, you didn't need a saxophone. You could sample it all. But I couldn't get to grips with the more harder electro side of it. I liked the black music side of it, the soul, the rhythm and blues, the jazz, of course, since day one. Coming back to at home, growing up in the 60s, I got into jazz because my father played upright piano, and he would play a lot of swing bits and pieces. And when I got to sort of like mid-teens, I'd ask him what they were and make a mental note, make a written note, and go into a record shop and have you got any, which led me on to Blue Note, Blue Note albums and stuff like that. That's how I got into that. So my father was a big influence, because he, as I say, he could play the piano at home, and it was a hobby of his, but he was very, very good. He wasn't in a band or anything like that. None of my sort of relations or my close family were in a band at all.
Never went on to that. So when the music was changing and the more electronic sound started to come in on the disco, how were you finding you had to compromise your style? Have you ever compromised your style when out
I haven't
and about?
intentionally. What I did was that I took the best of what I liked from that.
Mm-hmm.
So the changes I liked, I played.
Yeah.
I didn't play anything just because it became the in thing, you know.
And
I used to get
did you ever feel that you were
of it in clubs and gigs? You know, have you got so-and-so's mix of so-and-so? And I'd go, no. And I'd play the Southport
you'd never
or the
you'd
jazz
never go
mix
home feeling sort of a bit deflated. Was
Oh,
there ever a
often,
time?
Often, because the
Yeah.
audience would have a go at me for not playing the right mix, you know.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. Because it's got to happen to the best of the
Oh,
people.
totally. Yeah. And it deflates you a bit. You think, and I all through my life, I've been a born worrier. It's just my makeup. This is the way I am, mentally speaking. And I used to worry about things like that. And then when I got chosen to do places like Caister, you know, I didn't get the first two Caisters because I had to do sort of like I was filling in for other people. I was filling in for Jeff Young on a Friday night at the Gold Mine, and Chris Hill on a Saturday night at the Gold Mine, and I was caretaking, I should say, at the Gold Mine for them. And then on the back of that, I got invited. You know, the Caister team's promoters said, they used to have meetings with the DJs in. They said, we want to invite. They brought me in and a couple of other people. And I started playing at Caisters 3, 4, 5, 6. And a couple of years, I can't remember the exact years, there was 4 Caisters a year because it got so popular and sold out so quick that they had to put one at the beginning of April, one at the end of April, one at the beginning of October, and one at the end of October. So you had 4. And then on the back end of Caister, you had Southport, you know, the Alex Lowe's promoted gigs. So I was fortunate enough that I would get, and by that time that I started doing Southport properly, I'd left my day job with the EEB as an electrical fitter, East Electricity Board at Chelmsford, and was DJing full time.
Beautiful.
Because I couldn't
put a timestamp on this for us.
Split the 2 jobs.
Put a timestamp on this, roughly.
Oh God. Started DJing full time, sort of. That would be early 80s.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. Whilst purchasing the music, I've interviewed a few people and they say they spread their wings and used to go off on record finding trips. Was that something that you ever delved in, you know, abroad or to the States, or are we getting ahead of ourselves at this point?
Not in the 80s, I didn't. I wrote down, I had endless books, A4 they were, because I used to listen to a lot of radio shows. I'd listen to Radio Luxembourg as well as specialist shows on BBC Radio London and the odd specialist show on BBC Radio 1 or whatever they called it at the time. So I ended up with lots of lists. And some of these things were imports only. So I had to get, you know, I might have to go to certain record shops in Ilford or Romford and get the imported the tunes to be able to get them and wait a couple of weeks for them. Did you have
any little secret offside guys who were your go-to that only you knew about, that you'd be able to get certain things off of before anyone else?
I had the sellers that would come round my house that I didn't have to go to, that surfaced everybody else. But once they got to know my taste in music, because I was one of the first in the southeast to sort of you know, utilize jazz into my playlists. And once they got to know me, you know, I'd have sellers come round my house on a Thursday where they'd just been to the airport to pick up the collection and say, do any of these, before I go to the shops tomorrow, do you want to buy any of these, you know? And I was married at the time, and much to my ex-wife's annoyance, I would overspend on the budget because I couldn't say no. And then when we separated and divorced and blah blah blah, my name started to get about, and I got more and more bookings, and I could afford to buy. I was good at bookkeeping then. I had money to buy for rent because I rented places, and I went to live in. I went the late 80s, early 90s. I went to live in Hoxton.
Okay.
And watched the Blue Note start in Hoxton Square, and I lived in just round the corner in a warehouse department. And I remember moving from Essex. It would have been about early 90s, and for the first time in my life, I had a hell of a collection because I wouldn't throw anything away, and I used to get loads sent to me as well from record labels. But they didn't look at what you were playing or what you specialised in. They looked at, because your name was up there as a DJ, they'd send you everything, pop, rock, whatever. And and with me, one of my, whether it's a problem or not, I never threw anything away. I just threw it. And when I got this warehouse apartment I started living in a warehouse. There was a bathroom at one end with toilet and that, and a shower, a big living space in the middle, an old print warehouse it was on the first floor, just off of Hoxton Square. And then at the other end, I had a bed. I racked out the middle bit, and for the first time, when I moved in, it seems impossible. People, you say, no, you didn't have that amount. But me and a couple of friends, they'll vouch for me, a couple of mates, I had 40,000 items that got racked out in, jazz, a lot of soul, a lot of rhythm and blues, a lot of blues. And then the unknowns went into another one. They were the ones I wasn't, au fait with or wasn't too sure about. Sometimes it grew on you. I hated, I did have pet hates when they came out. I hated things like, well, not hated, but I didn't like, I shouldn't say hated, that's wrong for me to say. I didn't like rap. I didn't like swing beat. It didn't fit in with what was going on in my head. I gradually got into rap. If the backing was jazzy and sort of like very soulful, I used to like the dub and not the delivery.
Let me just pause you there for 1 second. I want to draw reference to everyone that's with us chatting. Hi everyone, thank you for being here. A couple of people commenting on some of the things that you've said. Loved Keister. Sunday mornings in the jazz room were amazing. Mr. Reed, I was a regular at the nights at the Blue Note. And Tony Paul, who I'm
Steve
sure
Reed.
It is, yes.
Yes,
Tony Paul, friend. A very good friend of mine, and I'm sure you would have come into contact with several occasions. He says Hoxton Square, the home of Straight No Chaser magazine.
Yes, that's correct.
Wonderful. Okay, so thank you all again. I just wanted to let you know that I'm seeing all the comments. Okay, so 40,000 pieces of vinyl. I wanted to ask you. You said that you didn't like rap and things like that. So my story is always peppered with references to the birth of the electro movement, hip hop, breakdancing.
Sure.
So was you onto that kind of thing, or were you not really feeling that as well?
Only bits and pieces. I couldn't name you the songs right now because
of course, but something like pulling a name out of thin air. Sorry, forgive me for interrupting you. Pulling a record out of thin air. Something like Alnay Fish, Hashim Alnay Fish, or Man Parish, hip hop, bebop, things like that. You must have liked those, or not really?
Man Paris, I would have got into. Yeah, that's Theo, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it Theo Paris?
No.
I would have got.
I'm going back 20 years before then.
Yeah, not all of his stuff. Just bits of it. You know what I mean? Certain ones that because he experimented with a lot of left field soul tracks, didn't he? And
but
left
I
field
think
jazz tracks.
we're going forward about 20 years there. I'm
Oh,
going back
right,
to
right,
1983,
right.
1984.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry about that. Let me continue with your journey. Ignore my questions. So, we're talking about the you mentioned Southport. Some of the biggest momentous occasions that you can remember then when you started to work full time. What was your day to day, week to week kind of schedule?
Well, on the strength of Southport and weekenders, you'd get. I mean, at the time, pirate radio was massive in England, to an extent of a couple of stations, not the ones that I did early shows for Kiss FM as a pirate, and they didn't use there's part of the FM frequency that emergency channels like ambulance, aircraft and things like that, firemen and all that. They didn't. You didn't go between a certain frequency on that FM because that was your emergency channels. And I think a couple of London stations did. I can't remember their names offhand. So the government decided to issue licenses.
Okay.
And touch wood, I was doing a pirate radio show for Gordon Mack at the time for Kiss, and Kiss got a license. So that's how it started, really. I did a show, I did a Sunday show for them on Kiss FM legally. And again, once that started, the amount of mail you got, it was like unreal. But that opened up your audience because you were broadcasting to people on a much more wider scale because the transmitters were a lot better and the frequency was a lot better. And how could you not argue with Kiss 100? It's got a ring to it, isn't it? But even if it was, Dope 100 or Soul 100, it's that 100 FM frequency. And I was blessed with having a show on there, and then my European and world career took off. I was booked to do gigs in Europe mainly, but I was one of the first.
Would you say from the music has never been in question? Would you class yourself as a technical DJ? Did you like to really get busy technically with what you were doing with the music, or was it just purely about the records? You never really tried to get
purely, to me, I think it's about the history of it and how it started and stuff. Like I was never a big mixer. Not that I didn't like mixing. I had to learn myself, but I was never, a Pete Tong or a Danny Rampling who were, unbelievably, or a Louis Vega for that matter, or a Kenny Dope.
I'll take Louis Vega. Yeah.
Yes, and I got, you'd get in with these guys because at Southport especially, you'd get to know them and things like that. And but so technically, no, I wasn't a good mixer at all. I think it was the content. I played at house gigs and I'd struggled through the mix. I would never, to a certain extent, I wouldn't clash the beats. I managed to sort of fuse the beats together, but I wouldn't call myself a technical mixer.
So because you knew your limitations, if I dare say that,
totally.
You handled it in the same manner. You knew what you would get away with, and you knew how to deliver the music.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. I mean, you'd be a fool to turn it down because people offered you half a mortgage to do a gig, and you said, well, I could do with the money, but I'm not really a mixer. I used to be very honest with the promoter. They said, that's all right, you play. And I do play a lot of, Afro, jazz, that are in the mix, dance.
Well, let me roll you back. You mentioned jazz. I always do my best to remain as ignorant as I can when I'm talking to my guests, because I don't like to be swayed by interviews they've done in the past. But
go ahead.
I couldn't help but see something at one point that said you're credited as being one of the first DJs to play jazz on the dance floor to the dancers on the UK scene. Will you accept that?
I'd say in the southeast, definitely. I don't know about London or what I call north of Watford, but I'd definitely say that lower part. Because all I did was play my record collection, and a lot of my Chelmsford crowd or Essex crowd that followed me around will cite me as well. Oh, they heard it through me, or they heard it, I heard that through Bob, and it was just in the mix, really. When I say mix, not mixed as such, but in the playlist that of my set at the time, because I liked it and it fitted in, and I got people dancing to it. So it didn't sort of empty the floor.
I was about to say, did you ever take any chances?
This is just pre-jazz funk when that crept in the mid-70s, like your Grover Washingtons and bits and pieces like that, and your Donald Byrds. I'd be playing Blue Note album just play that, mainly keyboard led, as I said, Hammond B3 and Jimmy Smith albums and stuff like that. So people knew, especially on pirate radio, you could get away with murder in terms of like your playlists. So people knew what my playlist was. And a lot of it was, especially my crowd, when I say my crowd, the Essex crowd at a pub that I used to do on a Monday night called the Countrymen. And the pub held 300 to 500 people. It was one long building because it was next door to a marketplace. So the marketplace was Fridays to Saturday. Oh, with the odd market on a Wednesday. Well, they used to get it busy because of the market crowd. And on a Monday night was normally a dead night because people would stay in, they'd been clubbing all week and all the rest of it. And within 2 or 3 weeks, I had the place, rammed top to bottom, over 300 to 400. You couldn't move in it. It would be like this. And a lot of it was left to centre musically speaking.
Well, when we announced that we were going to do this conversation, as you saw, there were a plethora, a world of people who were all happy to leave a remark about how you've impacted or influenced them down the years. A couple of people here saying Ivan Boogaloo, Joe Jones, Black Whip is a best memory of a Bob Jones tune. Black Wax was saying it's amongst everybody, so many records. He will say to you,
the expression, I thumped it rotten. Every one of my sets I played it. There used to be a guy came to the Countrymen called Tony. He came from he ran a shop in Colchester, and he used to travel down there on a Monday night, and Tony's Imports. And he came in and he said, I know you like a lot of jazz. This is prestige. And it's guitar player called Ivan Boogaloo Joe Jones. And I heard it at home and I'm going, I need this. I said, can I take it on spec? And if I like it, obviously buy it off you. I won't ruin it or scratch it or anything. He said, yeah, go ahead. So he used to come down sort of every other Monday with a pile of tunes that were brand new. He used to pick up imports as they came into the country. And I used to go home.
Is this a different Tony to my Tony Paul? A different Tony, or Tony? Are we talking about you?
Tony,
no,
it wasn't Tony Paul. No.
Okay.
This guy was Tony. I might remember his surname before the end of the program, before the end of the interview. But he came from Colchester way.
Okay.
And he ran a company called Tony's Imports. So that's how we got to know each other, and he would supply me with this. But I'd go home with about, I think the Countrymen, I got 20 to 25 pound a night. I'd go home with about a five where I'd spend, where's your wages then? In that record box.
We'll get them next week.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, just spend all my money to sort of.
So by this time, you've afforded yourself the following of a really good crowd, a really good community of people
they
that
like
would follow
my
you.
Playlist, because all I've ever said And he's all I've ever said is that if you employ me, Bob Jones, all I play is my record collection. If you like it, fine. If you don't, I've got no problem with that. But I don't, I'm not a pop DJ. I don't play anything out the charts unless it charted or it, like your Al Greens of this world or your Wilson Pickett's of this world. Obviously, it would be on my playlist. And I also play a lot of left of centre, like up and coming tracks and things like that. I don't do it to be, I've never been ego or nothing. I suffer from, believe it or not, all my life I've suffered from low self-esteem. It's other people that say, we love your radio show, we love you, but it keeps you going. It keeps the momentum in your head that they like it, so you must be doing something right.
Well, I did say to you when we were testing everything out yesterday, for a gentleman who's achieved so much in such an illustrious career, still very down to earth, and that's a credit to you, and it's a credit that everybody wants to see you succeed. Anybody that gets any hint of arrogance about them, the moment they start to fall from grace, everyone's pulling at them to make the fall from grace ever so much faster. But with yourself, when you've got those people behind you and you are such a humble guy, everyone's holding you up there because they want to see you do well and they want to see you continue. And you brought everyone along. You brought everyone along with you.
People you've spoken to. Thank you. A million thanks for that. God bless you.
No problem. But you brought everybody along because they knew what they were getting with you, right?
Well, it's two or three of my hardcore friends that are still friends with me, that as punters since day one, and literally since day one, they used to come up the pub at the Redberry and DJs, and then on to the Countrymen pub, and then K-Start, Southport. We became jazz fanatics, but and there's I'd say there's probably half a dozen of them I see at gigs now, and we talk like we went to school together, and they're a bit younger than me, but they cite me as I dictated to them what their choice in music was, and there was nothing false about it. I said, well, you could have gone. Why didn't you go down the poppier route? And they said, because we liked what you presented and we liked how you presented it. And the rest is history, really. And I get embarrassed I used to still do get embarrassed in interviews about, because I think it's a lot to do with the fact I don't realise I'm as good as what other people say I am, because I do suffer from low self-esteem still.
But
I'm in my early 70s now, so I don't think that's ever going to go away. That'll be there until I draw my last breath. And but it leaves you with a bit of low confidence that what you're doing, So I used to say, to get my get out clause was, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, I'm not bothered with it. I fully understand.
Well, listen, not
everybody. You know yourself. Not everybody is into everything.
No,
all at once, are they? It takes time. You might grow up not hating, but not liking a certain genre of music, and then a couple of years later, someone plays you one, and your head goes, yeah, I like that. Yeah. And yet 2 years previous, you didn't like it.
You had turned onto it.
Music is a mad form of, isn't it? That's as you seem to get older, there's an allowance there, isn't there? And you're easier with it than what you were, say, 2 years previous.
I'm not sure if allowance is
the right choice of word.
I'm not sure. I know exactly what you say, but I think it's just that you become aware. You become aware of different things. Your perspective changes.
When you're older.
It's like if very briefly, myself, I was very focused on purely house music, and I never had any time for anything outside of that house music spectrum. As the time progressed and I didn't have to focus on putting sets together for every weekend, I suddenly allowed myself to look outside of the house spectrum, and it's like, oh my God, I've missed out on 40 years of this incredible music. Now's the time.
I get that all the time. I still say, someone will play me a jazz album or something from the Prestige catalogue, because I collect And because I've been digitalizing, I've got most of my catalogues on CD now. So I haven't got rid of things like Ivan Boogaloo, Joe Jones. I've still got Black Whip, but I'm on about my third copy vinyl. He's one. And another favourite album of mine is that I'm on about my third or fourth CD was it's a '60s album by Jimmy Smith called Back at the Chicken Shack. It's him on the front with some cockerel and a chicken shack behind him, but it's mainly sort of slightly up tempo, like rhythm and blues type jazz. You with me? With the Hammond, of course, Hammond B3 organ. And then from that I got on when it's funny enough, when I got into Benson, I went backwards to get into people like Wes Montgomery and people like that who are brilliant guitar players and stuff like that. So it's a weird scenario. I think it happens to a lot of us if you're that open-minded, because I don't dismiss dance music. I find some of it boring. It does nothing for me. But there's other stuff, you know, the Dennis Coffeys of this world. I prefer the more musical enhanced dance music than just a banging 4/4 beat.
Yeah,
Does that make sense? Am I
yeah, no, I totally get that. A few people making some comments there and everything that we're saying. Mr. Magoo is heaping praise upon you. He says, legend is a term that's used by many to a few, but Dr. Bob is the epitome of the word legend. Jimmy Mack, good evening, sir. I'm sure we can get you some links at some point. Jane Harrington, good evening. Jeff Jefferson, giving you love.
Yeah, Jane, yeah.
Joey Fabini, locked on as well. So many people. I'll say again, if you just recently joined us, I am seeing all the comments. I'm reluctant to interview Bob. I'm reluctant to interrupt Bob, so I will get to you at some point, guys. Wayne Morrell as well, before I finish giving shouts out, he says he loves the fact that you said it's my music, you either like it or you don't. So
well, it's my record collection. You either like it or you don't. You don't. I mean, I'm without trying to put the question into your head. You get mates, don't you, that have a music collection you might be listening to that you're not quite au fait with, but it doesn't dismiss the fact that they're your friends, isn't it? And that's what I say to people. You either like my record collection, because all I play is my record collection. I don't go with any trends. I just play what I feel like playing. That's not me being ego or big-headed at all, because I'm far from that. But I just play what I think is nice within my remit and within my collection.
I love that.
And I wouldn't play
nice.
I wouldn't play any different. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be any different. And then again, I like growing up the way I've grown up, musically speaking. You know, I wouldn't have that any different. You know, listening to Chris Hill at the pub in Orsett in Essex called the Orsett Cock, and he used to play over there before he got the gold mine, and he used to play some of the most obscure jazz on the planet. So he was a big help in, although we never knew each other at the time, but you'd bet, you know, I'd be on my 10th notebook during the course of about 2 or 3 years of listening to spin.
I think I know the answer to this question, but were you ever tempted to be drawn to records purely because you couldn't get hold of them, regardless of the quality? Or did it have to be a good record for you?
It had to be. It had to click the switches in my head musically, and emotionally.
Yeah.
Whether other people enjoyed that or not, I don't know. That's all I can say to that question, really. So, there were obviously during you know the modern soul era and the soul boy weekender era when that first started. You know, your Casters and then your Southports and all that. People would play and chart, and they'd say, "This is great, isn't it?" And I'd go, "No, I don't like it." Look at me as though I was nuts, but it always has been, Andy, as a personal thing.
Most definitely,
it's always been. You know, I either like it or I don't like it, and unless I'm pushed, I won't. Because some people get angry, don't they? That you know, some people will go down the top 30 of the latest black music releases. I want that, and play 20 out of 30. They might not like everyone, but they play it because it's the latest top 30 within that genre. Am I making sense here?
Complete sense.
Whereas
Complete
me,
sense.
I like it, and I might go, no. Oh yeah, no. And people are surprised why I don't like it. But it got, in the end, people like Fred Dove and Jeff, and when, you know, as I say, on the back end of when disco kicked in big time and jazz funk kicked in big time, most of the record companies knew my taste was left of centre. And I don't mean that in an egoistic bit. It is, you know, I didn't like the normal tracks on the album. I liked the more left of centre, and sometimes the two-step tracks on the album, because I grew up at DJs. That was another thing. It was 8 till 2 every Friday that I played from 71 onwards to the mid-70s. I had to do 2 slow spots because it was boy meets girl, girl meets whoever. And I had to play 2 quarter-of-an-hour slowies during the course of my Friday evening. So
erection sections.
Yes, exactly. You got it right. But I remember one time playing, someone was talking to me. It might have been a record company bod or something like that. And I wanted to carry on the conversation. I stuck on Isaac Hayes' By the Time I Get to Phoenix, which you probably know. And well, I know he does a rap at the beginning with just a single note on a Hammond, because he's a keyboard player, of that supposedly country and western tune. He turns it into a rhythm and blues. I'm trying to remember which album it comes from, but it's about 9-10 minutes long. And I distinctly, the first time I played it, one of my friends came up to me after about 8 minutes and went, "Does this go on any further?" I said, "Well, yeah, about another 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, actually." Only there's this bird giving me the eye in the corner that I want to dance with, but I can't dance to this. And I went, "Fine, no problem." But I loved things like that, you know. But I had to do 2 slow sets. Well, you know, when disco kicked in and dance kicked in, especially if you're doing a house night or something like that, there was no slow stuff, was there?
No.
There was. You never went below about 120 BPMs. It was from about 120 BPMs was considered slow, wasn't it? Or slower. But it was like up in the late 20s, early 30s, a lot of the rhythms. And yeah, it was funny that I had to play 2 slow sets in the early days. I wouldn't have survived otherwise.
You were talking about a few records.
I want to pull, get a slow record on, mate. Yeah. The slow sets. Yeah. 10. First slow sets. Oh, I've got to wait that long. Yes, I'm afraid you have.
Yeah, they don't care about your record collection when there's a chance of a rub up on the dance floor. Let me bring you back. Let me bring you back to you mentioned about some of the record labels and your impeccable ear, and you started to forge a very clear path of where you were going. Did any of the labels come to you at those stages, asking you to be on the lookout for new artists and new music? Were you turning them on to new acts at this point?
Well, I was fortunate enough to know Pete from BBE Records.
Okay.
And before they formed the label, he said to me, "Could you do some compilations for us? And you can license, you know, put on there whatever you want, but you'd give them more than what they wanted in case certain record companies they couldn't." And I said, "Do you want me to stay middle of the road, you know, easy, so it's a dead, or do you want me to go left of centre?" No, you do what you do best. So have a few left of centres in there, and you know, just compile albums for them. And I did one, and Kev Dards, the Northern Soul DJ, rang Pete up and said, "That Bob Jones album, I did Stop and Listen Volume 1 on BBE Records, and on the strength of that, he wanted to do a compilation with me, so we did Stop and Listen Volume 2. And Kev's slant on it was because he was big on the northern scene. he would play the most obscure northern that you never heard in your life, and yet you liked. You with me? And you couldn't get hold of because of, the budget was through the roof or something. You could. In the early days of him playing and all that, not just his playlists, other people like Richard Serlin and people like that, what they were playing, if you tried to get record dealers to buy them for you, you're talking, and these are 45s, you're talking $1,000 plus.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. You'd moan if you paid £10 for a 45 back in the day. So what I'm saying is those compilations kicked home. So someone picked up Stop and Listen, which had 20 tracks on, because they were mainly 45 tracks. So you had like 2.5 minutes on each, or just under 3 minutes on each track. You had like a double vinyl, or I think Stop and Listen Volume 1, was it a double or a single vinyl? Anyway, it had maybe 25 tracks on there that most people on the modern soul scene wanted, because I broke a lot of what they call modern soul scene records, not 60s soul scene. The modern soul scene was the 70s and 80s, in Britain, and I collected. And there was a guy who had his own warehouse full of stuff called John Anderson, who lived in Norwich, just north of Norwich. He had 2 warehouses full. He used to go to America and just buy 45s and albums. And he wouldn't let many people in there. It was a mail order only. He used to do a printed list each week. But I think it was Keb that got me in there. I went in there and it was like the Aladdin's cave of, I could have gone bankrupt with the amount of stuff that he had in there that I wanted. But he provided 60s records and what he called modern. And funnily enough, the northern soul scene hated the modern soul scene purely in terms of, at the time, purely because of the distance in years, or they didn't make any successful 60s records after 1969. If you go into 1970, it's all that James Brown funk stuff that we can't get into, because they never got into funk. They were not initially. They were into the more soulful stuff with strings and things.
We're being informed Soul Bowl Records.
Soul Bowl Records in Kings Lynn, yeah. John Anderson, yeah. Did it used to do a weekly list.
And Andy Davis used to work there. Andy Davis used to work there, I'm being told.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so the BBE connection would have been much later on. If we go back to the sort of like mid to late 80s, to paint me the picture of what was going on there, if you can. Is it easy for you to differentiate between the different years, the different eras, or is there a time when it kind of all gets a little bit confusing, or is it very clear in your head because of the music?
I don't think it was the years. With me, it's always been a feeling. It doesn't matter what year it got released. So it didn't matter. It was.
No, sorry. Maybe I didn't.
What feeling I got from that bit of music.
Sorry, maybe I didn't. I didn't probably put the question across very clearly. When we're talking about years in your DJ career and the music scene, is it easy for you to look back and immediately be able to pinpoint what was happening in 1987 or what was happening in 1992?
It used to be, but because of the grey matter's a bit thin now. No, it is because of our age. Hands up, I'll admit it. It used to be. I could say, oh yeah, I remember when that came out. And sometimes you wouldn't pick up on things directly they came out. You picked up on things like hearing another spinner DJ play it or something months later or years later, or a record dealer would say, this came out 5 years ago, it's unknown, do you want it? And you knew the artist, so you took it on spec. But yeah, it was for me back then. I was known for talking to people about the obvious, but also introducing them to the unobvious. And have done over the years. And I haven't done that to gain points. I've done that because they're in my record collection. Does that make sense?
Completely. Tell me the story. Tell me the Coldcut story again. because that's quite interesting. That must be one of many occasions
the Coldcut story.
Yeah, where you've been able to have a very influential hand in the success of an artist or a record label.
What happened was Jonathan Moore from Coldcut, and then you got Matt Black. I knew John through clubbing in London anyway, and I used to play Otis Clay's version of George Jackson's "The Only Way Is Up." George never recorded it himself; he just wrote it. And Otis Clay, great, what you call Southern soul singer, from the southern part of America, and a brilliant mid-tempo ballad singer as well. He did this dance tune back in the day called "The Only Way Is Up." I used to play it a lot, and Jonathan Moore came up to me when Kiss was I think it must have been when Kiss were legal, because I can't remember when the Coldcut version came out. And he said, "Matt wants me to ask you, what's that song you play with Otis Clay?" And I said, "Oh, what? The Only Way Is Up." And he went, "Yeah." And he went, I said, "That made a great pop tune. Listen to the hook on that. You can imagine people throwing their hands in the air," because rave was starting to get big at the time. And
I was going to say, you've got to be talking about 1991 when the Coldcut came out.
Yeah. So in that case, then Kiss would have been legal, not illegal, I believe. And I said, "Oh, that's Otis Clay." I said, "It written by a guy called George Jackson." So John goes, "Oh, cheers, thank you." And I told, they wrote all the details down. And then fast forward, and they played me the Yaz version, which I didn't exactly like. Very electronic, nothing to do with the production the production. I just didn't like it at all. But it wasn't my cup of tea at all. But I could understand the attraction of it. And then within 6 months of releasing it, I think they were #1 in about 3 or 4 countries in Europe, and the ridiculous sales compared to their normal electronic stuff, because they were experimenting with electronic sounds, and it put Yaz on the map. Her vocals on as a singer on the map, as a commercial singer of dance music. But more importantly, it put that on the strength of that being voted #1 in. I got Muscle Shoals recording studio ring me up. Jimmy Johnson and David Hood, the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, who owned the studio, that Jerry Wexler owned in the 60s, right on the banks of the Mississippi River, where Atlantic recorded stuff and Stax recorded stuff. And they said, "George is one of our in-house writers. Would you come down and see him?" And at the time, I said, "Well, I can't really afford to go to." No, we'll pay for it. It'll be a week's holiday in Muscle Shoals. Oh my God. So they invited me down there, all expenses paid, and I met George Jackson. And David Hood and Jimmy Johnson, who owned the studio, the bass player and the lead guitarist of the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, who were, without being racist, were white guys, but influenced by black music in their hood. They said, "You made his life a lot easier, not because of the fact that you suggested to them to record one of his songs, but the way they described it was he had, say, something like $500 in his bank account 1 minute, and then 3 months later, when the royalties drifted in, $500,000 in his bank account. So he's gone from, I can afford that cigar, or I can afford that tip for now, and which made his life a lot better. And he said, "Thank you so much," because he wasn't exactly earning, because his songs have always been left of centre. But if you listen to it, The Only Way Is Up. And at the time, rave was getting in, and clubs were,
I think it must have been 89.
They shouldn't have been on, but the whole thing clicked.
Yeah, 89, 90, I think was when Yaz came about. Okay, now Steve Blackwax is saying here, we have to talk about Black on Black Records, surely.
Oh, that's my own record label, Bob, B-O-B for sure. So yeah, that was me. People said, "Oh, you should write a book," and I said, "Well, I'd rather start my own record label, and that was when I was at Kiss. I was getting demos for stuff. So I started Black on Black Records, which was the soul side of it. And then I started another, there was a side release to Black on Black, which the symbol on the label was a tin can, which was called Quick Release. It looked like a soft drinks can, you know what I mean, with the tab on it. So I started them. But the downside of me, a few things that we had out on that, sort of got into the lower club charts, but nothing major, because they were two lefts of centre on both labels. I wasn't very good with, at the time when I started it, I wasn't very good with, I could manage my DJing career, but I wasn't very good with bookkeeping and things like that, because I just jumped in at the deep end. I did most of it myself. In the end, I had to help, a mate of mine who was an accountant. He sorted it out, and he said, you owe X, and you've only got half X in your bank, you know what I mean? So the whole thing ground to a halt. But yeah, Black on Black Records, B.O.B.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mark Randall comes in and he says, I'm loving this, Bob. You're looking good, and I feel another long chat coming on at Southport in March, and spot on. And Sarah Woodward is loving the interview. So we talk about Black on Black Records. Our paths would have crossed from your time at Chili Funk Records.
Oh yes, yeah.
So how did that come about? Your connection with Lofty and
well, Lofty rang. I was living at Hoxton at the time.
Okay.
And Lofty ran a record shop in the West End called Flying Records in Greek Street. He managed it, and I used to go in there for my soulful house stuff, because most of the stuff I got sent wasn't so. I'd get jazz and jazz funk, but I knew very few labels or people who ran soulful house labels. And we got to know each other. And he said, "Can I speak to you? Can I treat you to a coffee? And I want to discuss a bit of business." I said, "Fine." And we went to one of the local coffee houses in Soho, and he said, "I want to do my own label, but would you be joint A&R, because the stuff that you're buying off of us." And I was doing a column in I think Echoes at the time about soulful dance, Black Echoes magazine. He said, "And some of the stuff you mentioned is not middle of the road, it's left of centre, but it's very, very good. Would you consider being joint A&R for this new project that I've got? I want to call it Chili Funk." And it was named after a film. I think it was John Travolta played a character in a film called, is it Ferris Bueller's Day Off or something?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah, and he played a figure called Chili something, and he named it the label after. He said, "I'm going to call the label Chili Funk. Do you want to come?" And that's how we started.
Well, we are actually
the label was totally his idea, and I went along with it. But I'm not knocking it.
Well, it
took my name into a different genre of music that people didn't know I was interested in.
Well, yesterday on the radio show, I played an old East-West connection record.
Oh yeah, that was me and him. Yeah, with a group of people like Neil Angilly and people like that had bands back in the day. And yes, we started our East-West connection, because basically that was another simple thing. It was simple names, we weren't trying to prove anything. He came from the west side of town, and I came from the east side of town, Essex. So East-West connection, the two were connected, and that was it. It was a simple, but yeah, obvious, but it worked. So
that was the 90s, early mid-90s, and I fond memories of playing those records and going over to Miami and
that's
up and down the country,
getting gigs at the flipping Ministry of Sound, and actually playing at clubs that I visited socially, and I had to prove to them I could play them dance music. Most bizarre, because of my low self-esteem, not thinking that I'm a dance DJ. I'm a black music DJ, but I'm not exactly the best mixer in the world. So yeah,
well,
that opened up a lot of doors for me, Chili Funk.
I was going to ask you because of your lack of confidence. Did you ever feel out of your depth at any time?
Oh, totally, totally. Yeah, I shouldn't say totally. Not every gig, but I always remember he said we've got to do a party. Lofty's go. They want us in Miami for this party, and I went. I said, what am I going to do? Hold your record boxes? And he went, no, you've got to play. I said, Morales is going to be one of the best mixers at the world. Ministry, Kenny Dope and Louis Vega are going to be one. You know what I mean? And Dennis Ferrer. I said, they can mix blindfolded with their hands behind their back, and you're asking me to. And it was funny. I was playing a set there, and I got a nudge like that in my side, and I turn around like that, and it's Kenny Dope, Kenny Gonzalez, one half of Master of Work. And at the time, I didn't know it, but it was obvious connection. He was the beat master because his personal taste in music was 45s and breaks, and that he liked it. He didn't just buy them because he wanted to look for the obscure. He had to buy things he liked. A lot of it was funk, early 70s funk, pre-James Brown and things, and James Brown and Kool and the Gang and things. And he would buy the 45 just for the break that wasn't on the album version or something like that. So out of Masters at Work, Kenny Doug Gonzalez is still a very good friend, and we swapped titles. And he nudged me, he goes, hey, who's this? He was a man of a few words. Very intelligent man. Not why they call him Dope, because of his record collection is so slick
and if I may say, quite misunderstood as well. A lot of people have a different opinion of
one of the
Kenny.
best players on the planet. That's why Louis uses him, because he knows that if they're doing a remix for something, he'll come up with some obscure solo of a tune that no one's else used. And I've turned Kenny in his own way onto a lot of jazz stuff. I said, listen to this, Bray, listen to that, Bray. Do you buy jazz 45s? He said, no, I buy jazz funk 45s. I said, no, you should get into the 60s. Blue Note offered stuff on 45, still, not now, much more sort of like digital. But back in the day, you could get a Jimmy Smith single on 45, be it 6 minutes down to about 2.5 minutes, part one and part two. I said, listen to a lot of their 45s and you'll see what I mean. And he started collecting that stuff. And I used to give him the nod if I got 2 copies of something. And we still talk now. We talk about once every 2 or 3 months. And yeah, he's a very good friend. And I don't mean that to gain points. I mean that musically speaking, he should have been born an Englishman.
You take all the points you can get when you're giving influence to some of the biggest in the game, because we've all been influenced.
But you don't ask for praise, you're just passing it on, aren't you?
Well, we are here to give you praise, brother. That is why we are having this conversation.
No, I'm indebted, because I've known you for a number of years, and when you said would you do an interview, there was no problem there. I'm indebted to thank you for having me on your program. I really appreciate that.
You're more than welcome, my friend. We've still got so much that we haven't covered.
We'll have to do a part 2.
Well, we haven't finished yet. Are you good? Can you give me some more time?
I can give you about maybe an extra quarter of an hour at the most.
I'll keep you another 10 minutes. So let's talk about some of those renowned, some of those legendary sessions at Southport Weekender that you became known for. Some of your favorite moments down the years that you played there. Because you definitely stamped your mark on that spot, right?
In which room?
Which was your favorite room? The smaller room or on the big stage?
I was in awe of the big stage.
Was it the Connoisseur's Corner that you were really...
Initially, I was scared of the big stage because I didn't, low self-esteem, you don't think you're good enough. but I ended up loving the big stage. But the connoisseurs corner and the jazz room were my favourite rooms to play. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you
I could,
you used to love the finale. You would
yeah, yeah.
that was a bit. And I always remember you would always we lift our hands in the sanctuary. That was your tune.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
That
yeah.
was your tune that you'd always.
Yeah, that's a tune and a half. That ticks all the boxes for me. Yeah,
Okay, so I
definitely.
mean, I say
Because
this
it's a
to a lot.
gospel. The roots of that, it's a gospel tune. So I got into a lot of gospel music, which some people get. That was through Southport, through some of the stuff the Americans were playing that had been housed up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, "What's this?" And they'd say, "Oh, that's so and so recorded in the late 70s, and we put a 4/4 beat underneath it or something like that." And I'd make a note in one of my notebooks and go out and try and find the original. So yeah, I used to like a lot of that, but it hasn't been an easy ride financially, because you know what it is when when you got mortgages or sad family to support or rent or whatever. You have to honour those things. And when you look at your budget in the bank at the end of the month and you haven't got the rent money, because I've spent it all on tunes, it can be a bit nasty, and the better half in your
Mm-hmm.
ear because of it. So it hasn't been an easy ride, but I'm pleasantly surprised that people have respected it.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Well,
that they
I'm
shouldn't.
always keen to say when I interview people who have half of the career that you've had in the industry, in a short interview, it is absolutely impossible to get someone's full life story, and
Exactly,
everybody
exactly.
knows that we've
And I
hardly.
don't mean that in an egoistic sort of a way, but you're right in a way that it's only when you think about it, when you said, I'd like to do a piece on you. Because didn't you contact Deb initially and talk to her about it, and then she gave me the link, and
Mhm.
here we all are. And because of my friendship with you over the years, I've known you for years and years. But you think, well, where do you is it a certain genre or a certain time period, or is it the whole of it? Because it is ongoing. As long as you're breathing air, it's ongoing, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, where you and I have been in this game for a while, you obviously
Yes, exactly,
for quite a
exactly.
while. When you do interviews, it tends to be because you're trying to promote something, you're trying to get sales for an album, you're promoting a new party that you're doing.
Right.
This is simply an opportunity for us all with you here to lay
Yeah,
some
but you're a true
flowers.
friend. I owe you for this, man.
No, not at
Seriously.
all. Let me
Yes, I do.
let me just say, everybody wants to let you know how revered, how well loved you are, how influential you've been to everybody down the years. And
That's very kind of you.
you
Thank
were
you.
very vocal recently with a health scare that you had, and I think people would like to know where you are with regards to that now. So let's just finalise the last 5 minutes of the conversation.
About my health.
Talking about the last few years, what you've been through and where you're at now.
Well, the last few years, I started. You've got two lymph nodes here in your neck that everybody they're based around there. Everybody gets affected. Their lymph nodes in their neck when you have a cold or a flu, they
Mhm.
swell up slightly. Mine were looking about twice the size, and I wasn't feeling that good. And they, instead of being sort of like swollen but not hard, but they were just bigger size, there was a lump on one side. So I went to the doctors. Cut a long story short, I'd got cancer, which surprised me. And my father died of cancer. He was a heavy smoker at the time. My brother doesn't smoke because he suffers from bronchial pneumonia as a child, and I don't smoke. And my two sisters never smoked. So it wasn't as though it was an inheritance from my family. I just woke up one day with cancer on one of my lymph nodes, and I'm in remission at the moment. I've had it worked on by radiotherapy. That for about the first 6 or 7 months affected my moods, the radiotherapy, and kept feeling tired and bits and pieces like that. And affected, funnily enough, this arm, as that I have a pain. I can't lift that shoulder higher than that. This one's fine, but because it was on this side, the cancer's affected this, and it's affected the muscle in my arm. Not that I've got cancer in the muscle, but it was just the after effects of the radiotherapy has caused that. That'll gradually go down. I have to take daily tablets, 3 or 4 tablets a day. My health, if your audience is thinking about how's it getting on, because a lot of those names you mentioned that have sent you messages, I've known those guys for years. I'm fine. I'm on the plus rather than the minus. I've had worse.
That's what I wanted to get across, because I was fully aware of the journey you've had.
It's been a slow process, Andy. It's not, you can't flick a switch, take a couple of pills for a couple of months, and it happens overnight.
But you didn't shy away. You didn't shy away from telling everybody what you were going through, did you?
Deb told people at the first, because she said I was getting funny mood changes, and one of the mood changes was I was sounding off. People would go, and I'm not known for sounding off or getting angry. I'm known for being laid back the other way, too laid back for my own good, really. But I'm not known, because I never used to stand up for myself in the past. I let other people do that for me, and it's just, I used to get embarrassed about it. But I used to sound off, and it was part of the this cancer. I'd go, if I was, when I'm talking to you now, if I didn't agree with part of what you said, I'd slowly but surely say, yeah, but hang on a minute, what happened if so-and-so happened, or something like that? That would be the normal Bob Jones. But when this started, I'd be going, screaming, and 9 times out of 10, I'd take it out on Debs. So our relationship was suffering from it, and so I had to go to Chichester Hospital to Mind, the organisation called Mind, which is a mental thing, saying, yeah, it's part and parcel of the medication you're on. The one of the tablets is causing you to. So I gradually cut that one out, and it stopped all that. But yeah, I was going from one extreme to the other, because Bob Jones has always been laid back and easygoing, not screaming. You'd definitely figure that, and not necessarily speaking up for himself when he should do, because he's very laid back and easygoing. So part of the medication that I was on for the cancer did the opposite, and I was a raving loony. And I was swearing. And not only that, I was swearing at people that had been my friends for years, and they'd say to Deb, "Is he all right? Is he all right?"
I'm sure people would forgive you, but the takeaway from this,
but I had to explain it, because that's what was happening. So now, no raging, calm. Well,
and as you say, in the words,
everybody raises their, don't they? But
every now and again,
nothing as bad as what it was. Yeah.
And you say it's more positives now. You're on the up. You're out and about.
I haven't touch wood. It's the last I've checked, and it's on it. It's out or on its way out completely. So yes,
fantastic.
I'm blessed with feeling a lot better. And another thing that they couldn't understand, I've never been a big eater, but I had a healthy appetite, and my appetite went while in the early days of the cancer, and I went down to a sticking set. I lost about 3 stone in weight, which is a lot for me. I've never been, you've known me, I've never been, the old, I might have had a little beer tummy or something like that.
A bit of a derby on you.
Exactly. You know the score. But that, and so I'd never been a bit, I wasn't a sort of like, never been that way, and I lost a lot of weight. Now I'm putting weight back on.
Good.
I'm eating healthy when I get up. I'm sleeping a long time.
Let's roll back very briefly to these these comments that are coming in now. Okay. Angela, who's been listening intently from the beginning, she says, "You've played the music of my lifetime, Bob, from the age of 17 to 40 years later. Love and blessings to both you and Debs. I've loved the interview. I've loved the interview. Thank you both. Emily says, bless you, Bob. And Steve says, Mr. Reed says, that scared me to see you like that. So pleased you look better now. Mr. Magoo says, even to this day, even though he doesn't play out regularly, if you see Dr. Bob's name on an event, it is a beacon of quality, a master in his field. Long may Dr. Bob give us a dose.
That's very kind of him. Thank you. Oh, well, very kind, and very kind of you to invite me. Thank you. But all those people, I love, thank you, and God bless you.
Jane Harrington as well saying, love you, great interview. Now, the very
Yeah,
nature
Jane.
the very
Good friend of
nature of the
Deborah's
way
and
we
mine.
do these interviews is the fact that we get so many more people coming back and checking them out than we get who are able to join us live. So you will be seeing a lot of comments popping up on this video over the next couple of days.
And
so
it'll be under your name on.
I will give you the link. I'll give you the link where you can check it out.
Send us the link. Yeah, that'd be brilliant, Andy. Thank you.
And
thank you again for choosing to interview me. I really appreciate you. Our friendship does go back a long way, yes. And we both respected each other's choice of musical directions within the black music scene. But bless you, my friend. Honestly, big love to you. And I owe you a sarsaparilla when I see you.
For sure, mate. And I'm going to bring you back on with some more of the legends of the scene, because there's still a lot more that I want to talk to you about, my friend.
Yes, certainly. At any time, just set it up and we can do it.
Well, I was glad to break.
I'm still breathing on the planet, but we can still do it. Yeah,
and definitely. You will be. I'm glad to have broken your Zoom cherry. I'm going to leave you to the rest of your evening, my friend.
All right. Thank you very much. God bless you, and big love and soul to you all.
One love. Take care.
And you.
Oh dear. Dr. Bob goes. Okay, let me just take a second to just ground myself after that conversation, because that was a big one for me. That was a bit daunting. I'll read these comments. Tony says, love you guys, a great insight. Thank you, Mark. Mr. Randall, great stuff. Needs a part 2 without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I'm fully aware we barely touched the surface, did we really? I was just reluctant to interview him too much, and I was just quite happy to sit and let him speak. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Rupert. As I'm sure you could tell, I was trying to let him know that we were going to be doing a Chili Funk special in a few weeks, but I couldn't get the words in. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mark. Again, thank you, Wayne. So, yes, ladies and gentlemen, inspire and be inspired. This is what we do. We try and give flowers to the people while they're around. We try and capture their stories. There's no long-term gains, but just to let these people know how special they are. We've all lost a lot of our very dear friends in recent times, and we've not had the opportunity to let them know how special they are. So I try to make it my priority every week to find someone who has an interesting story and who needs to be told how special they are. As you can see here on the screen, coming up in 2 weeks' time, actually, I won't be here next week. I'm going to be talking to Claudio Passavanti, aka Sunlight Square, but more importantly, aka Dr. Mix. His incredible tutorials, his incredible musicianship has afforded him almost 650,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. We're going to be talking about that side of him, and we're also going to be talking about why he's an incredible person as well. I will just end off by saying to everyone, thank you for coming back and checking out these interviews. I have got a world of others that you can check out on the wall. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, then please do click that like button. The reason why we say this all the time, by you clicking the like button, it enables YouTube to know that you've enjoyed what you see, and the next time we go live, it will bring up a reminder in your feed. And if you feel like you want to, then hit the subscribe button. I've been doing a lot of research, and it says that you don't really need to ask people to subscribe. If they've enjoyed what they see, they'll subscribe anyway. So I'll leave that up to you. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Bob Jones, too much love, my friend. I will be back in 2 weeks' time. I'm off on holiday. See you later, everyone. Lots of love.